I'm Joey Pites, and I'm here to help a little bit, do some facilitating, and get us starting with you and I together this wonderful Tuesday afternoon. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our amazing speaker, Scott Jensen, who's going to talk a little bit about making jerky.
All right. Well, thanks, Joey. I'm not sure about the amazing part, but hopefully we'll have a little fun this afternoon as we make some jerky. Got to introduce my step over here, Jordan. This is Jordan Einig. Jordan's going to be my trusted assistant this afternoon as we go through how to make some jerky. Okay, so today we are going to talk about making some jerky, but before we get started in that, just want to put in a plug for those of you who may not be familiar with University of Idaho Extension. Basically, we're everywhere in the state of Idaho, and we work on a lot of different topics and issues, and really work to help bring the knowledge and research of the university to folks on a local level. Got just a quick video here that highlights some of the one area that Extension works in.
University of Idaho Extension is growing Idaho's economy by improving sustainable food production systems while supporting ranchers and farmers. From livestock and forages to pest and disease management, variety development, small farms and food systems, and farm and ranch management, UI Extension is helping to build a better future.
All right, so with that, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I am an extension educator in Hawaii County. I do mostly livestock, range and pasture work, and there you can see just a few pictures. The one on the left, picture from an artificial insemination class last year. I do at least one, sometimes two or three of those classes a year. The middle, a research project at the Rinker Rock Creek Ranch. And then on the right is another research project that actually is occurring just over the state line in Oregon, where we're looking at using livestock cattle grazing to try to reduce the risk of fire by reducing the fine fuels. And so just that's kind of the areas, or those are the areas that I work in. So kind of to get started, we are going to so first, I just would throw out the question, or what is jerky? And I'll answer that since we're in this kind of format. But jerky is just a way of preserving, if you would, some dry or some meat. And so most of the time, jerky is made out of red meat. And but anyway, it's utilizing a combination of spices and salts typically, and maybe even a little bit of cure in there, and a drying process in order to preserve that, make it last a lot longer, and not only that, but you can infuse some great flavors into it. There are a couple of different types of jerkies. My favorite happens to be, and I'll pull this out and hold up a piece of it, but my favorite happens to be jerky that utilizes basically some whole muscle cuts. And so thinly sliced whole muscle is the kind that I like. You can also make some with some ground meat products. And so you would take some hamburger or some deer burger, elk burger, whatever, some ground meat, mix it with spices and cure, and then put it into something like this. This is a jerky press, a little gun. And so I would unscrew it, fill that full, and then put that back on, and then I can just create some little jerky strips, however long or short that I want to, and put those in a smoker or a dehydrator to dry them. But My wife prefers this type. I prefer the whole muscle cuts. And so it just is a matter of personal preference, really. But so what we're going to do tonight is talk a little bit about how we might, at least we're going to do one of the brine recipes that I really like. And those of you that have kits, or if you got on the website or picked up the materials, we're going to make some peppered beef jerky. And so I'm going to change the camera, and my trusted assistant is going to start to put that together. So let me just switch the view here. All right, so we're looking over here, and Jordan's gonna go through that recipe. And so one of the things that I like to do personally, just to start out, I like to use a Ziploc baggie. And the reason I like that is because, one, I don't have to have the space for a large container in the refrigerator. I can just, set that baggie in there any way possible. The other thing I like about it is that I can, once the meat and everything's there together, I can just kind of work it around and help work that frying into the meat. So first, on this recipe that I think y'all have, we're gonna add some soy sauce. So this is a cup of soy sauce. Yep, we've got a pre-measured out here, just like let me help. Just like a fancy cooking show. We've got a cup of soy sauce we've got in there. Next, we're gonna put in a half a cup of Worcestershire sauce. And if you haven't ever tasted those too much, both of those tend to have a bit of salt in them. And so that's what I think really helps to be able to preserve and make the jerky last a little longer. We have, if you jump down here, we've got some minced garlic. And so I'm a little lazier. I like to buy it already minced up. And so a jar with minced garlic, or you can mince up some cloves, that works too. Then we've got a half a cup of brown sugar. We'll throw that in there. And then we've got some onion powder. Gonna throw that in there. Add some good flavor. And now we come to some things that I would say, at least a couple of items that I say are a little bit optional. And that would be the red pepper flakes. Because if you're somebody who can't handle a lot of heat or a lot of spice, then maybe you want to cut back on that a little bit, or even eliminate it. There's no hard and fast rule there, but I don't mind a little heat, so we're going to throw in some red pepper flakes. And then one of my favorite of all, we're going to throw in 2 tablespoons of black pepper, ground black pepper. If I was doing it at home, I would probably use coarse ground black pepper. You just can't get too much black pepper, in my opinion. And last but not least, in this brine recipe, we've got a cup of beef broth. And so we're gonna put that in there. All right, Jordan's gonna zip that all up nice and tight. And then he's gonna work on shaking it up while I work on getting the meat ready to go in it. So let me jump back here. Yeah, so he's shaking it up, and I'm gonna actually, I forgot, I'm gonna move this other camera up here so you can see a little bit and talk to you about how I like to prepare the meat. All right, so I got cutting board here, and so these are pre-sliced just to make it a little easier today, but these are some big, some pretty good sized pieces of meat. And so there are a couple of things that I would say about jerky that I think are important. One is that the drying process, really the temperature is going to be low. And so I don't like to have a lot of fat in the meat because of the low temperature. It's not enough to really render that fat or cook it down or cook it out. And so I try to go with as lean as possible. The other thing that I do is I trim off any of this external fat on the outside, because it's not going to hurt anything, but for most folks, they just with jerky, they just don't like that that fat there. Okay, and so yep, that's pretty darn good, Jordan. So I trim those off, and then you notice on this cut of meat, there's a big white strip here. If you left it, you could leave it in. It's not going to hurt anything, but it's going to make that jerky pretty chewy. And so I'm just going to trim that out of there. All right, and so then I'm left with these two pieces that are really not much in the way of external fat on them. They're pretty well ready to go. Let me quickly trim up this other one. Now, if you're not using meat like this, as in that's been pre-sliced and nice and thin and easy to do, one of the things that's really important in order to be able to slice thinly, that meat just has to be cold. And so I actually would recommend that if you're using, like the recipe that we had available here, it says to use 2 pounds of eye of round roast. And so if you're using some roast, I would actually put that roast in the freezer for about 30 minutes and then pull it out to slice it. You'll find that that meat will be a lot more firm and will just slice up so much nicer than if you have it otherwise. So then you're left, as you can see on the cutting board there, left with some pretty nice pieces of meat. Now, for most folks, these would be some quite large pieces of jerky. And so there's two different ways you can look at it. I like to put them on the smoker in big chunks like this, big pieces, because it just makes it easier for me. I could cut it all into smaller strips right now, but then I have more small pieces of meat that I have to work with. And so I like to leave them bigger than this, or this size, okay, kind of as big as possible, thinly sliced, but as big a pieces of meat as possible. And then once the meat comes off the smoker, then I'll take and I'll cut them more into kind of individual serving sizes or bite sizes, however you want to call it that way. That's much easier than in my opinion, than trying to work with a bunch of little pieces of meat. And so with that, these four, this one, notice this one's kind of got that extra piece. That would cause me a little grief on the smoker. So that one I cut it, just so that I'll be able to lay them out nice and flat and even without much problem at all. So Jordan's gonna open up his bag, and I'm gonna throw these in the bag and get them started marinating. And then I won't make you suffer through the rest of this, but when we get done, I'll trim up the rest of this and put it in that marinade, and then once it's there, I'm going to give it at least 24 hours. I like to marinate between somewhere 24 to 48 hours so that you have opportunity to for that meat to absorb the flavors. Okay, where should it marinate at? If I didn't tell you this, then Serene would be after me, but needs to be in the refrigerator. We don't want to leave the meat products out where they're gonna get warm at all. So we keep them cool the entire time, right up until we put them in the smoker. Okay. So then from there, I'm going to turn the camera back around, and Jordan's going to show you kind of how we lay those out on the tray or on the rack, getting them ready to go in the smoker. So I have some meat that I prepared yesterday, and so it's been marinating now for 24 hours. It's ready to go. And so we're going to pull some of that out and lay it on the rack and talk a little bit about how we do that and what's important about how it's laid out. All right, so Jordan's going to pull out some pieces and lay them on there so that important parts about it. So let me help you a little bit, Jordan. We want to make sure these things lay in single layers. Okay, and so if they're folded over on themselves or whatever, we want to lay them out, and then we're going to put them across the rack, not across the wire, not parallel with it, so that they will not fall through. Okay, so we get it laid out. We try to get it as flat as possible. And then the other important part of that is not only are we laying it flat, but we're making sure that they're not laying on top of each other. Okay. If they lay on top of each other, they're just not going to dry very evenly. We can put them close together. And you'll notice once you make some and it starts to dry, that jerky loses quite a bit of volume. It'll shrink up, and you'll find that even if they're right next to each other on the rack, that by the time they're ready to go, there's gonna be quite a bit of space in between them. Okay. And
Scott,
so, yes,
we have a couple questions. Someone asked if they don't have a smoker, what are their options? And then kind of along those same lines, someone asked about or made a comment about using possibly their air fryer. And then someone said, what about a dehydrator?
So, yeah, I actually have a note to mention that. So there are options other than a smoker in order to get it done. So for years, prior to owning a smoker, I made jerky one of two ways. It's possible to do it in the oven. Okay. And so the oven set on the lowest temperature setting it'll go, which seems like our oven at home maybe does down to 170, something like that. So as low a temperature as it'll go in the oven works. The other thing, I've used just a food dehydrator and done it that way. Now, if you do make jerky that way and you like a little smoky flavor, I would recommend that you add to the recipe maybe 2 or 3 tablespoons of liquid smoke. That way you can get a little smoke flavor in the meat without actually having the smoker. And so, yeah, there are ways to do it. But I will say that I've never personally used an air fryer. I don't know how that would work or if it would work. But that's certainly, there definitely are other methods to be able to get it done. Okay. All right. Then how long does it take to get it dry? Well, like I said, you're going to want to use the lowest temperature setting, pretty much the lowest setting possible. And I'll just tell you outright, whether it's in my smoker, which is a pellet smoker at home, or this smoker that I'm going to slide over and open up belongs to Serene here in my office. This is her smoker's an electric one that she has here. And I used on both of those, I use a temperature, I set them at 170. And at 170, it typically is going to take somewhere around 4 hours in order to get that jerky dry. Okay. You could turn up the heat a little bit, but remember the idea is that we want to dry it. We don't really want to cook it. Okay. And so Serene added to the chat that if you're using a dehydrator, there might be some kind of recommendations there in the manual of how to do that exactly. So now we've got this all laid out here. I would, from this point, I would put it directly into the smoker. Okay. And I'd have it ready to go. We're not going to do it in here. And I do need to mention, even though this smoker is sitting in here on the table now, I would not use a smoker inside the house. That'd be a bad idea. So I had this sitting out behind our office up until a few minutes ago, and then brought it in. And so I'm gonna jump over here. So we've got this one ready to go. And now I'm gonna slide the smoker up. Well, like I mentioned, I put some meat in this about 4 hours ago, and open it up, and it's about ready to serve. So let me pull this out, bring it over here and set it down. So here's the jerky that just came out of the smoker. And it was all nice and even until I carried the smoker in, and then it moved around. But how do you know when it's done, when it's dry enough? So I always tell I do a little bit of a bend test. Okay. I want enough moisture in there that it's not just going to snap off. It doesn't hurt it necessarily, but I just don't like jerky that's that dry. I want a little bit of moisture there so that I can kind of bend it a little bit, and I can see, not sure how much you can see, but I can see just a little bit of the tissue there that's holding things together. That way there's a little bit of chew to it, and it's not just a hard crunch. Now, occasionally I'm trying to find, so this is a piece here in my hand that's a little bit thicker. It was a little thicker when it went in, and so it's not quite as dry as some of the other is. This is a piece that it's just got a little bit more moisture than what I would recommend. And so this is a piece that I would probably dry for an additional, I don't know, maybe another 30 minutes or so would have it dry enough. But I kind of go through, and it's more a feel thing. So I want just, I want to be able to bend it just a little bit, but not have it snap. And some of that might just come with some experience. Okay. But once you do that, got it all done, then last but not least would be to store it. What are you going to do to store it? And I'm going to say that you need to store it in some kind of needs to be in an airtight container. So at home, I use a Ziploc bag. So I'll put all the stuff that's done and ready, have it in a Ziploc, and then I will, from there, I'll take that, and if it's going to be very long before it's consumed, which jerky tends to get consumed fairly rapidly, I might put it in the refrigerator just to keep it longer. If one of the things that does help if you're going to store very long is to add a little bit of cure to the brine. So with that, the last thing to do, I guess, is to take some and enjoy it. I tell somebody else.
It looks pretty good. Is Jordan going to try any?
Jordan's, he told me he's not actually a big jerky fan. Are you going to try some? Oh, he's going to try some for the camera.
Someone asked Scott, what's the shelf life of homemade jerky?
Well, I would probably defer to one of my food safety colleagues to answer that question, because I'm sure that I don't follow the rules very good. So, Serene or Joey, what would you say?
So it really does depend on how dry that meat, and when you jerk that meat and you pull that moisture out, how dry that is. A lot of people will make their jerky and put them in a great freezer container, a heavy duty Ziploc bag, and throw it in the freezer. And then, the shelf life, could be easily a year or longer in that. So we want to thank Scott and Jordan for a great presentation. And then
awesome. Well, I hope you guys give it a try. I've found that it makes for a great little holiday gift, because almost everybody, and Jordan even, who says he doesn't like jerky, sitting here eating it now. So maybe he just needed the right kind. But I would say thanks for joining us, and hope you enjoyed it, and have a great Thanksgiving.